Okay, so today we are going to talk about energy awareness and conservations. So ang energy ay very important sa ating everyday life, no? Because we use it almost everywhere, no? Kahit sa bahay natin. Now, these are the two types of energy. So energy resources can generally be divided into two major categories. So we have the renewable and non-renewable energy. So kapag sinabi natin renewable, these are energy sources that can be naturally be replenished or continuously available. So example, we have the sunlight and wind. Now on the other hand, yung mga non-renewable energy naman comes from the resources that are limited. Now once we use a large amount of them, they can eventually run out. So mauubusan. So, ang non-renewable energy cannot be generated again and again. Energy generated from combustion or fossil fuels, or energy from the coal and gas and etc. So, non-renewable energy refers to the energy resources that cannot simply be replaced or generated again and again in a short period of time. So, example, we have the coal, yung mga oil, and natural gas. So, these are all called fossil fuels. Now, for example, kapag nagsusunog tayo ng coal o nagpo-produce to produce electricity, so the coal was used and cannot simply be replaced tomorrow. So it took millions of years for many fuels to form, no. Kaya ang problem dito is that we have too limited supply. So if we continue using them excessively, eventually mababawasan at mauubos ang available resources. So let's talk about the renewable energy. So the renewable energy comes from the sources that can naturally be replenished. Pwedeng mapalitan? No. So examples are solar. So we have the wind. We also have the geothermal. We have the hydro, the biomass, and the tidal energy. So for example, every day we receive energy from the sun. The wind also continues to move, and water continues to circulate through the water cycle. So compare with fossil fuels, renewable energy sources can provide a more sustainable sources of energy. So in simple words, renewable energy is energy from the sources that nature can continually replenish. So for the solar energy, so this is come from the sun. So the sun provides a huge amount of energy that we can use in a different ways. So one way is through the solar panels, so which convert the sunlight into the electrical energy. So another way is using solar energy as the thermal energy, no, such as in solar water, meron din mga heaters and the solar mga cookers. So class, kapag gumagamit tayo ng solar panel, we are basically capturing energy from the sunlight and converting it into the form that we cannot use. So for example, instead of depending completely on electricity from the grid, a house can use a solar panels to generate some of its electricity. Next, we have the wind. This is another renewable energy source in is the wind energy. So we have the wind turbines or the windmills. So these are actually used the movement of the air, excuse me, to produce electricity. So think about what happens. So when a strong wind moves the blades ng wind turbine, so the blades rotate, and this is a mechanical movement can be used to generate electrical energy. So ang important concept here is that the movement of the wind, which is the mechanical motion, will produce electrical energy. So this is another example of how we can use a natural resources to produce a useful energy. Next, we have the hydro energy. So for the hydro energy, or you call it the hydropower, so they uses moving water to generate electricity. So usually, water stored behind a dam is allowed to flow. So the moving water turns the turbine blades, and then the turbine is connected to a generator that produces electricity. So remember, this is a sequence. So we have the water movement, the turbine rotation, generator, and then electricity. So this actually shows us again that energy can be transformed from one form into another. So we have the biomass. So biomass energy comes from the organic material. So example mentioned here include the wood, so mga waste, mga straw, mga manure, sugar cane, garbage, and agricultural waste. Now, in simple terms, biomass is material that come from the living organism or plants. So for example, we have agricultural waste that would otherwise be thrown away can be sometimes be used as a source of energy. So instead of considering a certain organic waste as useless, so we can see them as the materials that may contain stored chemical energy. Next, we have the tidal energy. So for the tidal energy, this uses the movement of the ocean water and waves as a potential source of renewable energy. So the ocean actually is constantly moving because of the natural process, including the tides and the waves. So this movement contains energy. So the technologies such as a tidal turbines can capture some of the movement and convert it into electricity. So just like wind and the flowing water, so moving oceans, water can also be used as an energy source. So the important idea here is that the nature provides the different forms of movement so that the humans can potentially convert into the useful energy. So now let's focus on the important scientific principles. So is simply the energy cannot simply be created or destroyed. So it can be transformed from one form to another. So for example, kapag gumagamit tayo ng electric room heater, the electrical energy is transformed into thermal energy or tinatawag natin na heat. So another example is the power plant. So the mechanical energy associated with the turbine so can be used to generate electrical energy. So class, energy does not disappear, it changes the form. So you call that energy transformations. Now, we come to an important questions. So why should we conserve energy? So first, many of the fuels we use are limited. Then the second one is that our demand for energy continues to increase. So habang dumarami ang tao, mga buildings, mga vehicles, appliances, and industries, so mas tumataas din ang energy consumption. So if we continue consuming limited resources without control, so there may become a time when these resources become difficult or expensive to obtain. So therefore, energy conservation is important because we want to use the available resources wisely and avoid unnecessary waste. Okay, so these are the limited fuels. So the original, uh, so actually, this number should not be treated expiration dates now because actual reserves, consumption, and technology are discovered that can change over time. So the important lesson is that the exact number of years na nakikita nyo dito. So fossil fuels are finite, so we should not waste them. So imagine a world where oil and gas become extremely difficult to obtain. So maraming aspect ng transportation, industry, and daily life would be affected. So these are just, no, hindi naman siya infinite. So just estimate, no. At present consumption levels, so the crude oil will last only for 40 years. So gas will last for 60 years. So the coal will be finished in nearly 200 years, even though of life without oil and gas. So our energy consumption is also increasing. So think about our daily activities. So we use electricity for lights, for example, mga fans, mga air conditioners. We also have the refrigerators, the computers. We also have the televisions, mga chargers, mga cell phones, and any other devices. So now the question is, what can we do? So sometimes students think that energy conservation is only the responsibility of the government, pwedeng mga engineers or a large companies. But that is not true. Even as students, we can contribute a simple actions such as turning off unnecessary lights and fans. So it may seem small, but kapag maraming tao ang gumagawa nito, consistently, the combined effect can be significant. So energy conservation starts with our daily habits. So in our schools, always switch off lights and fans while going out of the class. So buti dyan sa inyo, sa school natin, naka-aircon. But sa ibang school, they use fans. But again, you still use yung mga switch light, no? So kailangan siyang i-switch off yung mga lights. So here is one of the simplest ways to conserve electricity in our school. So kapag aalis na tayo ng classroom at wala nagagamit ng room, switch off the lights. No, why? Okay, ipatay natin yung aircon. Why? Because if nobody is inside the room, that there is no reason to keep them running. So for example, kung lunch break at walang tao sa classroom, unnecessary na naka-on pa rin ng mga lights, no? So remember, if not in use, switch it off. So sa mga laboratories naman, for example, computers, there, kapag tapos na gamitin ng mga computer, we should properly shut it down before leaving the room o hindi lamang natin pinapatay ang mga monitor. So we should follow the proper shutdown procedure for the computer. So the simple habit is to finish your work, save your files, properly shut down, and then leave. So this prevents unnecessary electricity consumption. So meron tayong mga computer sa Arellano. So kung gumagamit kayo noon, so meron tayong mga ComLab, if you are familiar with. So imagine we have a classroom design, no, for 40 students, but today only 10 students are present. So do we need every fan to be running? Not necessary. So kung konti lang naman ng tao, if the students are sitting together in one area, we may be able to use the fewer fans while maintaining the comfort. So ang principle dito ay is use only the amount of energy that is actually needed. So this is called using energy efficiently. The same principle applies at home, no? Kapag walang tao sa isang room, there no need to keep the lights and the fan running. So for example, if everyone is in the living room, you don't need to keep the bedroom light switch on. So this may look like a very small action, but remember, no, small habits repeated every day can reduce unnecessary energy consumption. So, no, sa at home din, no? So tell mother to take material out from the fridge it to be heated. So sometimes earlier so that cooking's gas consumption is low. So kung may mga ito naman ay mga sa mga frozen food, no? So mas maganda na uh, ma-defrost muna yung food no bago lutuin. Gas consumption ito. So another simple practice is to avoid opening the refrigerator kung sino man yung mga meron dyang refrigerator. So avoid opening the refrigerator door unnecessarily or too frequently. So every time that we open the refrigerator, the cold air can escape and the warmer air enters. So the refrigerator then needs to work again to bring the temperature back down. So tandaan ninyo, nag escape yung cold air. So yung the warmer air papasok dun sa refrigerator. Tapos ano gagawin ng refrigerator? Magkukonsume siya ulit ng electricity para mag-produce ulit ng lamig. So instead of repeatedly opening the refrigerator just to check what is inside, think first about what you need before opening it. No, simple habit, but it can help reduce unnecessary energy use. So sometimes we watch television and then leave the room while the TV is still on. So baka ganon din kayo. So that means that the television continues consuming electricity even though nobody is watching. So once you are finished watching, turn it off. So remember the simple rule. No one is using it, turn it off. So this principle can also apply to other appliances such as lights, mga fans, mga computers, and other devices. So this one naman, when buying a new appliances, so we should not look only at the purchase price. So we should also consider the energy efficiency. So for example, this slide encourage a consumer to look for the highly energy efficient appliances such as refrigerators or kaya mga air conditioners and other appliances. Now, sometimes an energy efficient appliances may cost more initially, but it may use less electricity during its operation. So mahal nga siya pero less naman siya sa kuryente. So when buying an appliances, ask how much electricity will this appliance consume while I am using it. So ganun ang lagi yung tatanungin. So, um, so this one naman is talks about the replacing traditional light bulbs with more energy efficient lighting options, so such as the CFLs and yung mga LEDs. So the important concept energy efficiency ito. So LEDs are widely used actually today because they can provide light while generally using less electricity than the older incandescent bulbs. So if we have the opportunity to replace inefficient lighting, choosing an energy efficient option can help us reduce the electricity consumption. So class, remember, saving energy does not always mean using less light. So sometimes it means using more efficient technology. So energy conservation should not stop with ourselves. So we can also share what we have learned with other people. So for example, you can tell your classmates, so you have friends, okay, siblings and family or family members about the simple ways to save electricity. You can say let's turn off the lights if we're not using them, or let's switch off the fan before leaving the room. So when a good habits are shared, so more people can participate. So so energy conservation is not only an individual responsibility, it can become a community effort. Okay, so that's it, and that's the end of our discussion.